This video will go over the section 5.2 practice knowledge check. So make sure to read each set of directions carefully, draw your bar model for each problem, and show all your work. Make sure that you simplify your fractions completely. So in number 1, you have 60% of 160. So remember that 60%, you want to write the percent as a fraction. So 60% would be 60 out of 100. And to reduce that, you can divide by 20. And that would be 3/5. So that means you're going to break your bar model into 5 parts. So sketch your bar model and break it into 5 equal parts. Okay, and then you want to figure out what 60% of 160 is. 160 would be the total value of your bar model. So this would be 160 would be the total value. And now we need to figure out what's the value of each individual part. So to figure out the value of each individual part, you want to take 160 and divide it by 5 since there are 5 parts. So that means that 32 would be the value of each part. So label each part as 32. And we want to know what 3/5 would be. That means what is the value of 3 out of the 5 parts. Okay, and those 3/5 would represent the 60% that we're being asked to figure out. So the value of those 3 parts, you could take 32 plus 32 plus 32, or you could multiply 3 times 32, and you get 96. So that means that 60% of 160 is 96. 96 is what we're looking for. Okay, number 2 says to find 25% of 180. So 25%, write that as a fraction. So 25% would be 25 out of 100, which reduces to 1/4. So that means you're going to break your bar model into 4 parts. So take your bar model and break it into 4 equal parts. And then the total value of your bar model is 180. So we represent the total value, right? 180. And then now we need to know what's the value of each of these parts. So to do that, you want to take 180 and divide it by 4. So 45 is the value of each part. So now we want to label each of these parts with 45. And then we're looking at what's the value of 1/4, which is 25%. So one of these fourths is 25%. So we want to know what is that value. So 1/4 is 45. So it means we write our sentence. It says 25% of 180 is 45. So our answer is 45. Okay, for number 3, it says that 16 is 20% of what number, so we don't know the total value of our bar model. That's what's missing. Okay, so we know the percentage is 20%. So you take 20%, which would be 20 out of 100, and that reduces to 1/5. So now take your bar model and you want to break it into fifths. So break your bar model into 5 parts. Okay, and then the total value of our bar model, we don't know that. That's what's missing. So that of what number, that would be the total. So we only know that 16 is 20% of the bar model. So we want to label 20% would be 1/5, and the value of that piece is 16 because we're told 16 is 20% of it. So to figure out the total, okay, that would be the total value of our bar model, so the whole shaded in region. So if each of these parts are the same, that means if one part's 16, each of the remaining parts are also 16. So to get the total, we can add 16 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16, or you can multiply 4 times 16, and you get 64. Okay, so that means that 16 is 20% of 64. And 64 is what we were looking for. Okay, number 4, 12 is 25% of what number? So again, we don't know what is the total value of our bar model. So we know the percent would be 25%. You want to write that as a fraction, so 25 over 100, which reduces to 1/4. So that means you're going to break your bar model into fourths, or 4 parts. Okay, so again, we don't know what the total value of our bar model is. So we only know that 12 is 25% of our bar model. So 25% of our bar model is 1/4. So we're going to label that 1/4 as 25%. And then 12 is 1/4 of that bar model. So since each of these parts are all equal, and we're trying to figure out what's the total value, so if one part is 12, that means each of the remaining parts is also 12. So to get the total, you can take 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12, or you can multiply 4 times 12. So you get 48. So that means that 12 is 25% of 48. And what we're looking for would be 48. So this concludes your review for your practice knowledge check. Oh, for your actual knowledge check. So make sure that you review the practice knowledge check and the extra review that was given prior to this, so that you're prepared for your actual knowledge check quiz.